Excel now has two brand new functions called IMPORTTEXT and IMPORTCSV, and using these functions you can connect to any external text file or a CSV file and get the data into Excel. Now these are brand new functions, so if you're using Excel with Microsoft 365, if you do not already have them, you will soon have them. Now in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about these two functions and some really cool tricks. So let's get started. So let's start with the import CSV function. Here I have a file link. So you can see I have this file that is saved on my system. So this is the path of that file. And I also have a web link. This is a web link of a CSV file on the internet. So I can get the data from this into my file using the import CSV function. Now the import CSV function takes these four arguments. The first one is the file path, which could either be this link to the file on my system or a web page. Then the second argument is skip rows. If you want to skip any number of rows from the beginning, you can specify that here. If you only want to get specific number of rows, then you can specify that here. And if you want, you can also change the locale setting. So I'm going to show you all of these. Let's first just use the first argument, which is the path. And now if I hit enter, you can see it has given me the data from that file, and it just gets the data and it knows that it is a CSV file because this function can only be used with CSV files. So it knows that it is comma separated. So it does the delimitation, it does the split, and it gives me the data nicely here. If you want to get it from a web link, you can do that as well. So I can select the web link here, and now it is going to go to that web link, fetch the data from there and put it in my file. Now, one thing is that if you're connecting to a web page for the first time, it may show you a dialog box and ask for your permission, just like it happens in Power Query. So let's go back to B1. Now in this data, let's look at other arguments. So here I have skip rows argument, and I can specify how many rows I want to skip from the beginning or from the end. So in this case, let's say I do not want the header, then I can specify 1. So it is going to skip the first row and give me everything after that. So it only gives me the data. In case I want to skip, let's say the last row, I can specify -1. So it is going to skip the last row from the data set and give me everything else. So in this case, let's remove this. The other thing is take rows. So for example, if I want the top 10 rows or bottom 10 rows, I can do that. If I want the top 10 rows, I can use 10 here, and it is going to give me only the top 10 rows. If I want bottom 10, I can use -10, and it's going to give me bottom 10 rows. If you want rows except the header, you can specify 1 as skip rows argument and then 10. So it is going to skip the header and give you only the data. Now the fourth argument is the locale argument, and this is a bit interesting. So let's have a look at these dates here. And as of now, it is showing 5th January. And if I change this, let's say I make this general, you can see it is 1/5/2026, which means 1 is the month, 5 is the day, and 2026 is the year. But this is being displayed based on my system's locale settings. And if you change it in the formula, the date will also change. For example, let's apply the locale setting for Germany. So I would use DE-DE, which is for German. And now when I hit enter, you can see that the dates have changed. The value is still the same in the cell, but the way it is being displayed is changed, because now if I change this and I make it general, now 5 becomes the month, 1 becomes the day, and 2026 is the year. So this is why when you change the locale, the settings will automatically change. So it allows you a lot more flexibility when you're working with data coming from someone in the US and you're working in Europe, then you can change the dates accordingly. Now let's have a look at the import text function. So here I have this function, and I can use a CSV file because import CSV is a shorthand version of import text. Import text is going to work in all the situations. Import CSV will only work for CSV files. So in this case, import text, I can use a CSV file. But one thing is that you can see there are a couple more arguments. I have the path, but I also have the delimiter, because in import text, you have the flexibility to specify what the delimiter is going to be. For example, in this case, if I just use the CSV file and hit enter, it gives me data in this format where I still have the comma. Everything is given in one single column because this function does not know what the delimiter is unless I specify it. In import CSV, it already knew that the delimiter would always be a comma. So in this case, if I specify the second argument, which is, let's say, comma, it is now going to work nicely. Similarly, you can connect it with text files. So in this case, let's remove this. and let's use the link for a text file. If I use this, and this is a file on my system and it is a fixed width file. See what happens when I hit enter? It gives me it gets the data from the text file, but it doesn't know the delimiter. So I will have to specify the delimiter, which I'll show you in the next example. And then you can also use the web link. So here I can choose the web link, and again it is going to go get the data from web link. It is not giving me the data properly because I need to specify the delimiter. Because this is a CSV file, I'll use comma, and then it is going to give me the data in the nice format. Now just going back to the number of arguments, it has the path, it has the delimiter, which is additional compared to import CSV. Then it has the same skip row and take rows, just like the import CSV one. Then it also has the encoding option. Now in most cases the encoding is something you will not be using, but if your files have a specific encoding, you can specify that here. And then we have the locale argument. So here I have a link to this text file, and if I show you this text file, it is something like this, where the columns are at specific positions. Now if I want to get this data into Excel using the formula, I can use the import text function because this is a text file. And if I just use this and hit enter, it is going to connect to that file and get the data. But as of now, you can see that this is not in the right format because the entire data is in one single column because the formula doesn't know how to split the data. So what we'll do is we are going to specify the delimiter, and in this case, in fixed width case, the delimiter is going to be something like this, where you have to specify the positions in curly brackets. So I'm just going to copy this part here, go into this formula and put this as the second argument. And now when I hit enter, you can see it gives me the data in the right format. The columns are split, and these are split based on the positions I have mentioned here. So if I go back to this file, it knows that at 0th position, the first column is going to start, and then at the 8th position, the second column is going to start, and so on. So you need to specify the positions here. Now, in case you have some other delimiter, for example, in this case, if I get the data from this file, you can see that the delimiter here is going to be a pipe symbol because the data is separated by a pipe symbol. So I can just come here and specify the delimiter. I can just click on this cell, so reference this cell, or you can hard code it. And now when I hit enter, it is going to give me the result in the right format. The data has been split based on the pipe symbol, where the pipe symbol is removed, but the data remains in separate columns. Now let's look at a couple of practical examples where you can actually use these functions in your day-to-day work. So here I have the file path of these three files. These are the data, sales data for January, February, and March. And I want to combine all of these files together and get the data as one single set of data. So what I can do is come here, use the import CSV function. Now in this case, this is a CSV file. If it is a text file, you can use the import text function. So in this case, I just use this function, and then it is going to fetch the data from this file. But I do not want it just from this file. I want it from February and March as well. Below the data, from below January, I want February, and then below that I want March. So I can use the vstack function where it is going to stack all this data together. So I would have import CSV with B2, then I would have import CSV with B3, and then comma import CSV with B4. And now when I hit enter, it is going to stack all of them together, and then it gives me the data like this. But in this case, there is a problem. I have these header rows that I do not want from the second or the third file. So that is a very simple fix. I can come here, and for the second file argument, after B3, I would have a comma, and then I can skip the first row. So it is going to skip the title, the headers, and only give me the data. And the same thing I can do for the March file as well. So B4 comma 1, and now when I hit enter, it only gives me the header from the first file, and all the remaining files only gives me the data. Now, one very good thing about this method compared to Power Query is that this will not break if your column names are different. So if your column headers are inconsistent, with Power Query, it actually creates separate columns. And if you want to fix that, then that becomes a bit complicated. But in this case, it only takes the header from the first row. And as long as the position of the column is right, the data in the column is right. For example, the first column always has the order ID and the second column always have the dates. It is going to work. It doesn't matter whether the column names are consistent or not. Now, in this case, I got the column header from the first file. But what if I do not want it from the first file? What if I want it from the third file? You can do that as well. So in this case, I would come here, B2 comma 1. So these three formulas, these three are only going to give me the data. And to get the header, I would again use the import CSV function. And in this case, get the data, let's say from B4, which is the file for March. And in this case, I'm going to only take the first row. So I would not use the second argument, but use the third argument instead. And now when I hit enter, you can see it has given me the header from the March file, and the data is combined from all the separate files. So this could be a pretty useful use case when you are combining files from different CSV files or text files. Now, you can also do a little bit of comparison of different files. So for example, in this case, I have these 3 files and I want to know what are the column headers in them, so I can quickly compare whether the column headers are consistent or not. And again, it's very easy. Import CSV, this file, comma 1. So this is going to, sorry, not comma 1, comma 1. So this gives me the header for January file, and I can just copy and paste it here. And you can see I can check if the columns are consistent or not. For example, in this case, these are not consistent, but I can at least see that the data is consistent in terms of number of columns. So these are the similar type of columns and they are same number of columns. So this is useful when you're quickly comparing multiple files. If you want to get the data for these files, you can do that as well. For example, in this case, I want to get the total number of rows. So I'm going to use the rows function, then use import CSV. And this is going to give me the total number of rows, and I can drag this down. So it gives me the total number of rows here as 16, 15 and 16. Similarly, you can do the same thing for columns. So I would use the columns function, then use import CSV with this. It gives me the total number of columns as 8, and I can copy paste it for these other files. So it instantly tells me the basic statistics of how many number of rows and columns are there. If you want, you can also, if you have a, let's say, numerical column, you can get the sum of it. If you have the total number, you can get the count of a specific product if you want. So that can be done. Now, in this case, I have these 3 files, and let's first do one thing. Let's import the data from one of the files. So I'll use import CSV to import the data from here. Now in this case, this is the data, but I do not want the entire data set. I only want, let's say, the data for furniture category. So I only want the rows for furniture. If I have to do this when I already have this data, I would come here, use the filter function, and then within the filter function, this becomes my entire array. And then I would compare this column. So select this column and equate it to furniture. And now when I hit enter, it only gives me the records for furniture, but then this is not dynamic completely. So let's make it dynamic. So I'll come here, use this formula and put it here. But now I have to somehow also automate and make this dynamic, which is E7 to E22, which is the 4th column. And that can easily be done using the choose columns function. So within choose columns, it's asking for an array, which would be the import CSV function with B2. So this is going to give the entire array, and then I can specify the column number, which is 4. So instead of using that cell reference, that is range reference, I'm using this part here, which is going to fetch the data from this file in B2, which is the January data, then only return the 4th column and then equate it to furniture, give an array of trues and falses, and then based on it, filter the data. See what happens when I hit enter? It gives me this result, and I can delete this part here. So this is the formula that works. Let's copy this formula and put it here. Now in this case, I just have the data, but what if you also want the header? We've already seen how to do it. We would come here, use the vstack function, then use import CSV, use this file, and then only take the header. And then we have the filter function that is going to give us the records. And then when we hit enter, it gives us the header, and it only gives us the category, which is furniture. Now, if you want to change this, you want to make it electronics, you can come here, you can change that. So if I come here and I think it was electronics. So I can put it as electronics. Yeah. And it only gives me the records for electronics. You can also have a drop down here. So when you change the drop down or make the change in the drop down, it is going to filter the data and only give you the relevant data. So this is like next level of analysis. It's not just fetching the data from the file into Excel. It is also using that data as an array and then doing calculations on it. Now, the last example that I want to show you is how to compare two files. So for example, in this case, I have the data from January, and then I have an updated file which has some changes in this file, in the main file. Now I want to quickly maybe know whether there are changes or not. And if there are changes, I want to fetch only those records where there are changes. So to do that, let's do one thing. Let's import the data from here. And then what you can do is actually equate it to the imported data from here. And what this will do is it is going to give you an array of trues and falses. And then if there is a mismatch, it is going to give you false. Now you can see, although it's a little difficult to spot in this one, you can see there's a false here, a false here, and a false here, which means there is a mismatch in this data. If I just want to know which row has a mismatch, I can come here and use the by row function, and then in by row I can just use and. So what it's going to do is it is going to give me one single vertical array where it is true if there is no mismatch in the row, but if there is a mismatch, it is going to give me false. Now, what if I want to extract those records from this file where there has been a change, or maybe this file? You can choose and you can adjust the formulas accordingly. But let's say I want to fetch the data from the January file and see what records have changed. So in this case, what I can do is I can import the data from this file. But then I do not want all of these records. I only want the records where there has been change. So I would come here and I can use the filter function where this is my array. And then the criteria here needs to be an array of trues and falses, which we already have here. Now, if I use this, it's going to give me the wrong result because it gives me the rows where there has been no changes, but I want a row where there has been changes. So either I can come here and I can add a not here, because true means there has been no change, false means there has been change. But if I want to extract it here, this needs to be true. So what I can do is come here and just use not in this case, and this gives me only those rows where there has been change. So we saw in the beginning there were 3 falses, which means that there has been change in these numbers. So you can now quickly get an idea of whether a file has been updated or not, and if the file has been updated, what are the rows that have been updated here. So these are the kind of practical examples that I wanted to show you using these new functions. I'm sure you can figure out many more use cases, but these functions are pretty powerful, and if you want to quickly connect to a file and get the data into Excel, these could be quite helpful. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Also, if you're liking these videos, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the bell icon so that you never miss out on any new Excel tips video I come up with. Thank you and have a nice day.